It was a Saturday afternoon when my grandson Jason showed up unannounced, as he often did when he had something special to share. I could tell by the look on his face that he had been planning something big. He was grinning ear to ear, almost like a kid who had just pulled off the best surprise in the world. And in his hands, or rather beside him, was a sleek brand new sports car, a deep shining red that practically screamed luxury. The car was incredible, one of those high-end models you only see in magazines or on the highway when some millionaire zooms past you. I'd often admired cars like this. Over the years, I'd worked hard, built a successful business from the ground up, and always dreamed of having something like that, though I never actually thought I'd own one. Jason knew I loved cars. Heck, we had spent weekends together looking at various car shows, talking engines, and discussing the finer points of luxury vehicles. But this was something else. It felt too good to be true. "Grandpa, look what I got for you." Jason's voice was brimming with excitement, almost as if he expected me to drop everything and just praise him for his generosity. He stood there, chest puffed out, like he had just solved the world's problems with a simple gift. "It's all yours, for your birthday. I know how much you've always wanted something like this." I stared at the car, trying to take it all in. It wasn't just the fact that it was new, it was perfect. The kind of car that made you feel powerful just sitting in it. And yet, something about it felt off, like there was a catch. But I didn't want to dampen the moment, so I smiled and walked over to take a closer look. "Wow, Jason, this is amazing," I said, trying to mask the unease creeping up my spine. I ran my hand along the smooth curves of the car's body, feeling the cold metal beneath my fingers. Jason, of course, was bouncing around with excitement, practically glowing with pride. "Isn't it gorgeous?" he replied, practically beaming. "I thought it would be the perfect gift. You've worked so hard, Grandpa. You deserve it." I chuckled and tried to play along. "Yeah, well, I guess I'm getting too old for these kinds of surprises, huh?" Jason laughed, slapping me on the back. "Nonsense. You're never too old for something like this." His eyes twinkled mischievously, but I was too caught up in the grandeur of the car to pay much attention to it. I slipped into the driver's seat, running my hands over the controls. The leather interior was pristine. The dash had all the high-tech gadgets, the kind I'd only read about in car reviews. For a moment, I almost forgot about the nagging feeling at the back of my mind. I pressed the ignition, and the engine purred to life, an unmistakable sound that felt like power itself. As I admired the car, something caught my eye, the brake pedal. It didn't seem quite right. It felt soft, almost non-existent, and my mind raced with thoughts. I pressed down on it a few times, and sure enough, it didn't feel like it was working properly. The brakes weren't responding the way they should have. There was an odd sensation in my gut. Something wasn't right. "Hey, Jason," I called, glancing up at him. The brakes don't feel right. Have you checked them?" Jason froze for a second. There was a brief hesitation before he put on a smile. "Oh, you know how it is with new cars. Sometimes they need a little break-in period. I wouldn't worry about it, Grandpa. You'll get used to it." His answer was so casual, almost too casual, and that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I gave the brake pedal another test, pressing it down a little harder this time. It was the same weak response. No real bite. It was as if it was barely functioning at all, but Jason was already moving on to another part of the car, fiddling with the touchscreen console like it was no big deal. That's when I started thinking, why would he give me a car like this, so beautiful, so expensive, and not ensure it was in perfect working condition? Why wasn't he concerned about the brakes? Was it just a mistake, or something more? Maybe he didn't know about it, I thought. Maybe it was just a technical issue. But I couldn't shake the feeling that he was being way too nonchalant about something so serious. I asked him again, "Jason, seriously, you didn't have someone check the brakes? This is kind of a big deal, you know?" "Grandpa, come on," Jason replied, laughing it off again. "Don't worry about it. Everything's fine. I've been driving it around for a week, and it's been fine. Just take it out for a spin, see how you like it. I promise it's good." There was that smile again, the kind that seemed too perfect, too rehearsed. I started to feel like something was being hidden from me. Maybe it was just my old age catching up with me, but the more I looked at that car, the more the feeling in my gut grew. Something was off, and I wasn't about to ignore it. The whole thing, the gift, The way Jason was acting, the odd behavior surrounding the car, felt like more than just a simple birthday surprise. It was as if he wanted to get me into that car for some reason. But what could that reason be? For the rest of the afternoon, I couldn't stop thinking about it. There were too many inconsistencies, too many little things that didn't add up. Jason had been overly generous, almost to the point of it feeling like an obligation rather than a gift. And why had he been so eager to get me into that car, despite the obvious issue with the brakes? As I lay in bed that night, staring up at the ceiling, I realized that this wasn't just about a car. It was about something much bigger, something I wasn't seeing yet, but I knew I had to be careful. I needed to keep my eyes open because Jason wasn't the same young man I had once trusted. I could sense it. And whatever he was planning, I was about to find out the hard way. Little did I know, that car wasn't just a birthday gift. It was a ticking time bomb, and I was the target. The days after Jason's surprise gift were strange, to say the least. On the surface, everything seemed fine. He'd given me the car, we'd spent a few hours together celebrating, and he'd been on his best behavior. But something about his demeanor, the way he kept circling around me in the car, started to feel off. It was like he was too eager, too interested in what I was doing, what I was planning, and where my thoughts were. Jason had always been a curious kid, but recently he'd developed an almost unnatural interest in my personal affairs, especially my finances and business decisions. It was subtle, almost like small talk, but it felt invasive. On one occasion, he casually asked me how I had structured my will. I brushed it off, thinking maybe he just wanted to know, in case anything ever happened to me. After all, I was in my 60s, and it was probably natural to wonder about those things. But as time went on, I realized this wasn't just casual curiosity. I caught him glancing at my laptop screen while I was reviewing some business documents. He claimed he was just trying to figure out how the company was doing, but I noticed the way his eyes lingered on the screen, particularly on the financial statements. He didn't know much about the business itself, so why was he so focused on the numbers? And why was he trying to get involved in discussions that should have been between me and my partners? Then came the strange conversations. He would ask me things like, "How's the business looking for the next few years? Got any plans for expansion? And what do you think you'll do if something unexpected happens? Do you have a backup plan?" The questions didn't seem malicious, but the way he asked them, it felt as though he was testing the waters, trying to gauge where I stood with my company. My answers, of course, were carefully vague, but the fact that he kept asking made me uneasy. One afternoon, after a particularly awkward conversation about how I planned to pass on my assets, I went into my office to review my financial records. That's when I noticed it. Strange withdrawals, some of which were large sums and transfers to accounts I didn't recognize. My first instinct was to blame a mistake, but the more I looked, the more I realized these were intentional. They weren't just simple accounting errors. These were carefully planned moves, and they seemed to be happening more frequently. I ran my fingers over the papers, my mind racing. How long had this been going on? How had Jason gotten access to my accounts in the first place? When I thought back to the past few months, I recalled a time when he had asked me for my account numbers, supposedly to set up a new payment system for the company. I had been too trusting, too willing to let him help me. Now, looking at the records, it was clear that he had been slowly manipulating the books, shifting money in ways that weren't entirely legal. And there it was. A transfer to a personal account under his name. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. Jason wasn't just interested in the business, he was trying to take control of it. Little by little, he had inserted himself into the company's financials, and now it seemed like he was setting up a larger plan, one where I would no longer be in the picture. But it wasn't just the money. Jason had also been acting strangely around my business partners. He would ask them about my health, about my future plans, and about my intentions for the company. I could tell that he was trying to create a picture of himself as someone who could step in and take over when the time came. It wasn't just about inheriting the business. It was about positioning himself as the rightful successor, as if I were already out of the equation. One afternoon, as I was having coffee in my study, Jason casually brought up the subject again. "Hey, Grandpa, I've been thinking," he said, leaning on the back of the couch, his tone nonchalant but with a certain edge to it. "What would happen to the business if you, weren't around anymore?" My heart skipped a beat. The question was direct, too direct. It wasn't just idle curiosity anymore. He wasn't asking how the business was doing. He was asking about my death. I'm not planning on going anywhere anytime soon, Jason, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady, my hands clenched around my mug. But if you're asking about the future of the company, it's all in the will. Jason smiled, but it was forced, like he was trying to hide something. Yeah, I know, just making sure everything's in place, you know? I mean, we don't always plan for the unexpected. I nodded, but my mind was elsewhere. I'd spent my life building this business. It wasn't just about money. It was about legacy, about the people who had supported me along the way. I couldn't shake the feeling that Jason was planning something. The more he pried, the more I felt like I was being pushed toward a cliff, and I wasn't sure if I would survive the fall. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. Jason wasn't just interested in my health or my business. He was after something much bigger, and I needed to figure out what he was up to before it was too late. That night, I sat in my study, staring at the papers, feeling more paranoid with each passing hour. What had started as a generous gift, his surprise sports car, was now starting to look like a carefully orchestrated plan to remove me from the picture entirely. Jason was acting like he was playing the long game, and I was the one being played. I decided then that I would have to be smart. I couldn't let him know I was onto him, but I'd keep my eyes open, and I'd make sure the next move was mine. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Jason's behavior had started to make more sense as I dug deeper into the company's financial records. At first, I had hoped it was just a coincidence, but now the pieces were falling into place. I wasn't just paranoid, I was uncovering something far more sinister. What I discovered in those papers would change everything. It started with a few discrepancies in the business's accounts. I'm no accountant, but I've been managing the company's finances for decades, and I could spot when something didn't add up. There were several odd transfers, small amounts at first, but they quickly escalated. I pulled out the spreadsheets and began cross-referencing them with the company's past statements. Sure enough, Jason's name was showing up. I had given him access to the company's books months ago, but that was just to help him understand the inner workings of the business. I trusted him, of course. He was family, but as I dug deeper, I found transfers under his name, ones I hadn't authorized. It wasn't just pocket change, these were substantial sums. There were wires sent to an account I didn't recognize, one that seemed to be tied to a third-party company Jason had connections with. This wasn't a mistake. This was calculated, and it was happening right under my nose. The worst part? He'd been doing it slowly, over the course of several months, making small changes that no one would notice immediately. It was like he was testing the waters, seeing how much he could get away with. By the time I realized what was going on, the damage had already been done. I quickly pulled up the transaction history of the account where the funds had been funneled. It wasn't just one or two transfers, it was a pattern, a deliberate strategy. Some of the money was being moved to accounts tied to an investment firm Jason had recently started to frequent. The firm was based out of a city I had never been to, and the paperwork for it had never passed across my desk. Jason had kept this all under wraps, hiding his trail while I was focused on the day-to-day operations of the company. The more I pieced things together, the more I realized Jason's role in the company had changed over the last few months. He'd been pushing his way into key decision-making processes, slowly but surely. He had weaseled his way into the board meetings, started asking for a bigger say in the direction of the business, and he even got his name on a few important contracts. It was all so subtle, so incremental, that I hadn't even noticed the full extent of it. But now, with the financial records in front of me, the truth was clear. Jason had been positioning himself to take over the business from the inside. I decided to dig further. I needed to confirm that Jason hadn't just been siphoning off money, but was actively trying to manipulate the company's future. I requested a full audit of all our accounts, a task I normally handled myself. When the audit report came back, it was a mess. Not only had he been redirecting funds, but he'd also started altering contracts and forging my signature on key documents. I couldn't believe it. One particular contract stood out. It was a deal for a major client we had been negotiating with for months, and it had been finalized while I was away on business. Jason had signed off on the deal without my approval, and worse, the terms were incredibly favorable to the client. Far too favorable, in fact. The deal had been structured in such a way that it would have put the company in a significant financial bind if things didn't go perfectly. It was clear to me now. Jason had been making moves to sabotage my legacy, all while pretending to be my eager, well-meaning grandson. I was filled with a cold sense of betrayal. Jason had come into my company with the intention of taking over, quietly, slowly, and under the radar. This wasn't a business mistake. This was manipulation at its finest. His goal wasn't just to take control of my assets. No, he wanted the company itself, the heart of everything I'd built over the years. I felt a sense of anger boiling up inside me, but I knew I couldn't act rashly. I needed to be smart. I couldn't let Jason see how much I knew. He had to think that I was still in the dark about his plans. But in that moment, I knew I was done letting him pull the strings behind the scenes. I had built this business from the ground up, and no one, especially not my own flesh and blood, was going to take it from me without a fight. I called my lawyer, Mark, and started the process of gathering all the evidence I had uncovered. We needed to lock down everything before Jason made his next move. But even as I began taking steps to protect my business, I knew there was something even bigger at play. Jason hadn't just been stealing money. He was trying to set the stage for something far more sinister. And now, I had to figure out how to stop him before it was too late. As I stared at the numbers on the screen, a chilling thought crossed my mind. What if he was already too far ahead? What if he'd planned this out so perfectly that I wouldn't be able to stop him in time? As the days passed, I started putting together the final pieces of the puzzle. My mind raced with the realization that Jason wasn't just after my money or my position in the company. He was planning something far more drastic. The more I watched him, the more I noticed subtle changes in his behavior. He seemed to be laying the groundwork for something that went beyond just business. I remember the conversation clearly. It was one of those casual, offhanded moments that made my blood run cold. Jason and I were sitting in the office, having a drink after a long day of work. He had been talking a lot about the company's future lately, constantly asking for more control, more power, and offering new ideas. But this time, his tone shifted. He casually mentioned taking the sports car out for a test drive, something I had been putting off ever since he gifted it to me. He was overly enthusiastic about the idea, suggesting I take it for a spin to really get a feel for the car's performance. It seemed innocent at first, just another of his ways to push me into enjoying the gift he'd given me. But there was something in the way he said it that made me pause. He talked about the test drive as though it were more than just a casual drive through the countryside. It was almost as if he had an agenda. When I pressed him a bit further, he mentioned something about getting the paperwork signed off for some of the new ventures he was pushing through the company. It was a vague statement, but I could tell it wasn't just a coincidence that he was bringing it up now. In hindsight, it was all too perfect. Jason was orchestrating a plan, one where he believed he could eliminate me without anyone suspecting a thing. He had already been slowly taking control of the business from the inside. He had altered our financial structure, forged documents, and manipulated key contracts. But now, it seemed like he was preparing for the next final step. If something happened to me, if I died in an accident, he would be in prime position to inherit everything. The more I thought about it, the more it became clear. The test drive wasn't about the car at all. It was about staging my death. He had been working on this plan for months, building a narrative where everything would seem like an unfortunate accident. The car, which was obviously defective, would be the perfect tool. If I were to take it out for a drive and something went wrong, well, it would be easy to frame it as a tragic mistake. And just like that, Jason would step in, inherit my company, and continue the business without anyone suspecting foul play. I could almost see it unfold in my mind. Jason would accidentally push me into driving the car, knowing full well that it had no brakes. He'd set everything up so that I would have no choice but to take the car for a spin, perhaps with him in the passenger seat to guide me. Once I was behind the wheel, he could make sure that everything went wrong. The car would crash, and the accident would be blamed on me being too old to handle such a powerful machine. At that point, Jason would take control of the company and my legacy, all under the guise of mourning my death. He would claim that it was an unfortunate accident, a terrible misfortune that no one could have predicted. No one would question it, except for me, of course, because I could see the plan unfolding before my eyes. I began to notice other signs that Jason was preparing for this eventuality. He had become increasingly distant, and he started making subtle remarks about what would happen to the company when I was no longer around. It wasn't just casual talk anymore. He was setting the stage, slowly but surely, making sure that everyone around him believed he was the rightful heir to my fortune and my business. But what he didn't know was that I wasn't going to let him get away with it. I had been around long enough to understand that nothing in life is ever as simple as it seems. I couldn't allow him to think he had me cornered. He might have thought that he was in control, but I had a few moves of my own left. I didn't confront him right away. No, I needed to let him think everything was going according to his plan. I had to be patient, play the long game, and so I kept up the charade, pretending that I was still oblivious to what he was trying to do. But deep down, I knew that the time had come to turn the tables. Jason had underestimated me, and now I was going to show him just how far he was willing to go, and how far I was willing to go to protect everything I had built. I just had to make sure that the moment was perfect. The test drive was coming, and so was my chance to finally expose him for what he truly was. The day I had been waiting for had finally arrived. Jason had no idea what was about to happen, and I was going to enjoy watching him squirm. From the moment I realized what he was planning, I had been setting everything up meticulously. I had made sure that everything was in place, and today, Jason was about to realize just how badly he had underestimated me. I had been playing along with his little game, letting him think he was in control. He had given me the car, he had been asking about my will and my company finances, and he was practically salivating at the idea of taking over everything. But what he didn't know was that I was already several steps ahead of him. He thought that the accident would be a smooth and easy way to bump me out of the picture and inherit everything. But I had set up a trap of my own. I had arranged a meeting with the company's top executives. They were all aware of what was going on, and they were eagerly waiting for the moment to witness the grand reveal. Jason, however, was still oblivious. He thought today was just another day, just another test drive for the car I was supposed to enjoy. The irony was that he had no idea that this would be the last ride of his life, at least the last ride where he thought he had any chance of controlling my company. As we prepared to head out, I played the role of the excited grandfather. I had to act enthusiastic, like I was thrilled about getting behind the wheel of the sports car. Jason was practically glowing with excitement, all too eager to get started. I knew he wanted me to take the car out and eventually crash it somewhere where it could look like an accident. I had been fed up with his scheming and manipulation, and I was about to turn the tables on him. "All right, Jason," I said with a grin, "let's take this beauty for a spin." Jason practically beamed, oblivious to the danger that was looming over him. "You're going to love it, Grandpa. It's a smooth ride, you'll see." We both got into the car, and I could feel the adrenaline starting to build. I had already planned the route in my head, a carefully laid out path that would take us straight past the meeting location where my executives were waiting. The last thing Jason would expect was to drive straight into the trap he had set for me. We cruised down the road, with Jason in the passenger seat and me behind the wheel. He kept talking excitedly about the car, going on and on about its speed and handling, completely unaware of the irony of the situation. He had no idea that the car he had gifted me was about to become the instrument of his own downfall. All I had to do was wait for the right moment to make my move. We took a few turns, heading towards a quiet, secluded area where we could easily pull off the road for the test drive he had in mind. As we neared the spot, I casually mentioned that I wanted to take the car to a nearby lot where I had arranged a surprise for him. He looked at me, puzzled, but he didn't ask any questions. He was too eager to go along with whatever I said. I turned the car down a narrow street, leading us straight towards the location where my executives were waiting. The cars in the parking lot were parked in a neat row, and I could see the familiar faces of my top employees standing outside, watching us approach. Jason's face went pale as he realized something was off. His eyes darted around, trying to make sense of the scene in front of him, but by then it was too late. I parked the car in front of the executives and turned to Jason with a calm smile. "Well, Jason, it's time for you to take the wheel." His face twisted in confusion and fear. "What? I thought you were going to drive, Grandpa." I could see the sweat beginning to form on his forehead as he realized that things were not going according to his plan. He looked around, and I noticed how his eyes flickered toward the executives, who were now standing silently, watching him. The weight of the moment hit him all at once. He was cornered. "What's going on?" Jason asked, his voice shaky. "Why are they all here?" I didn't answer right away. I just looked at him, letting the tension build. His mind was racing, and I could see the realization starting to dawn on him. He was caught, and there was nothing he could do to escape. "Go on," I said softly. "Get behind the wheel, Jason. Show me how well you handle this car." Jason hesitated for a moment, his mind clearly trying to catch up with the unfolding situation. But there was no time left for him to back out now. Reluctantly, he slid into the driver's seat, his hands trembling as he adjusted the seat and the mirrors. The executives were watching, and I could see them exchanging glances, eager to see what would happen next. Jason started the engine, the roar of the sports car's engine filling the air. The car purred as he slowly pulled out of the parking lot, his grip on the steering wheel tightening. He was trying to act calm, but I could see the panic in his eyes. He had no idea what was about to happen, and he was beginning to realize that this wasn't just a simple test drive. As we drove down the street, I made small talk, all while watching Jason squirm in the driver's seat. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on both of us. This was it, the point of no return. Jason had no idea that I had already set the wheels of his exposure in motion. "How does it feel, Jason?" I asked, feigning interest. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he just kept his eyes on the road, clearly distracted by the growing pressure of the situation. I could see him glancing nervously in the rearview mirror, as if hoping to find a way out. But there was no escape now. We made our way toward the executives, who were all standing outside, waiting for us. Jason's eyes widened in realization. The tension was thick, and for the first time, he was fully aware that everything he had been planning was about to come crashing down on him. I looked at him one last time before the moment of truth arrived. "Well, Jason, looks like the real test is just beginning." The car cruised smoothly towards the gathering, and I could see Jason's entire world starting to collapse around him. This was the moment he had tried to avoid, and now he had no choice but to face the consequences of his actions. Jason stepped out of the car, stunned to see the entire board watching. I looked him in the eye and said, "Tell them why the brakes don't work." He froze, no lies left, no way out. The silence said everything. The executives had seen enough. Jason walked off without a word, and I walked back into my company with my legacy intact.